And lastly, today we will be doing the Charlotte Hornets, who they don't have as high of a draft pick. They are number 6, but they have a pretty solid young core. They have guys like Lamelo Ball, Brandon Miller, and Mark Williams, and a few other young guys on their team. But I think the name of the game with them is that they can't really seem to stay healthy. For this year, they just committed to their youth movement. They traded away Terry Rozier and Gordon Hayward, who had a pretty big contract, and they got back Trey Mann and Alexei Pokusevsky from the Thunder. So it's clear now that they're just trying to go all in on these younger guys. But they also hired a new coach too. But I think the big thing with them is just getting these guys to have a full season together. And some of that may be just the fact that they were in a bad position, so they didn't want to try and have them fight through it. But I feel like there's a lot of uncertainty just off of the fact that these guys haven't consistently played together.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned some of the injury history. The biggest one, obviously, being Lamelo Ball only playing in 22 games last year. Had some really good numbers, 24 and 8. Like that's their piece in the backcourt moving forward. And in a draft class where I feel like we've been saying it this whole day, like so many question marks, this is one of the teams where it'll just be like, who do they deem as the best player available at pick number 6, and probably just figuring out a way to utilize the strengths of that player, because I feel like this is a team that's got their point guard, they've got their wing for the future, and there's still some potential at that kind of 4 or 5 position with Mark Williams and Nick Richards. So it's just going to be who's there and how can they use them best.
Yeah, this is a team that I really like a lot of the pieces they have, especially some of like their under the radar younger guys like Amari Bailey, Bryce McGowan, Nick Smith Jr. Like these are guys I think are really, really good players or will be eventually. So for them, I think it'll be about probably finding the best wing to fit into what they already have. I know they have a decision on Miles Bridges coming up. But yeah, so they should definitely go wing, in my opinion. What do you guys think?
I know that this year they were also one of the worst perimeter defensive teams. I don't have the stat pulled up, but I know that they were one of the higher teams in terms of opponent three-point percentage. So I'm sure that will also be a point of emphasis. I know for me, they already have a guy like Brandon Miller who he does guard a little bit, but I wouldn't be surprised if they also go for another wing and a guy like Ron Holland. I also feel like Stephon Castle could be a good fit there just because of the defensive energy that he brings, and he can be a little bit more of a 2 guy. I think for them, defense will definitely be the name of the game too. I also watched an interview from their coach, and he said that's going to be one of his points of emphasis for the season, because obviously they have that fast-paced style of offense that they kind of already have established. But I also too, I do kind of wonder like if they go after a wing, how that'll kind of work together. They might have to go after somebody who can play a little bit of that 4, just because I think Brandon Miller was their one positive this season. I would imagine that they're fully sold on him going forward.
Yeah, I think Ron Holland is like the tailor-made fit if he could just shoot the basketball. Like I think he, like you said, they weren't that great defensively last year, but I really like Brandon Miller's defensive upside. Like I think he shows some flashes of being like a real plus defender, kind of like an early Paul George like type of player. So he's someone I think can be a potential anchor of a defense going forward. LaMelo, obviously, he's not. That's not why he's out there. But even then, he had like, this was one of his best seasons before he got hurt. Like he was really making noise this season. So I like the direction the team is going. I think Ron Holland would be perfect if he can shoot. So if you can convince yourself that he's a better shooter than let me see, I think he shot 24% from the 3 this last season with G League Ignite. Yeah, he shot 24%. So if you think he would be a better shooter than that, I think he does everything else perfectly, like perfect fit. Like rebound, the intensity he plays with, which is kind of lacking a little bit from like guys like LaMelo. Like the team kind of takes on the best player style a lot of times you'll see in the NBA. And he seems like he's like laid back all the time. And sometimes they're, especially on the defensive end, they seem like that. So I think Ron Holland is kind of the perfect juxtaposition to that. Like he's definitely like a real plus defender, someone who you could put on the best player every night. And I think they could have something similar what the Timberwolves have, like where you have two guys like that you can put on the other two teams' best player. Like you have the Timberwolves have Anthony Edwards and Jaden McDaniels that they're just going to dispatch on your two best ball handlers or best scorers, and they're going to make their nights really, really hard. I think Brandon Miller has the potential to eventually become one of those really good defensive players, and I think Ron Holland probably comes in already ahead of where he is. So I really like Ron Holland for them, but the shooting concerns me. So I think another option for them would be Tyler Smith. I know he's not the greatest like on-ball defender, but he provides some level of rim protection. Like he's kind of like sneaky. His block total like was kind of sneaky, and he stretches the floor really well. So that's someone I think would also be a good option for them.
Yeah, I feel like Ron Holland has, like you said, a lot of the things that Charlotte is going to be trying to do. He's got the speed to move in transition. Lamelo, he likes to push it on the break. So I feel like Ron Holland and Brandon Miller as kind of his running mates in transition could be electric. A little bit similar to like what we've seen in the past from Miles Bridges with Charlotte, where once they got out in transition, Lamelo and Miles Bridges had a ton of success. But again, this is another scenario where this draft is crazy, and Atlanta could say, we think Ron Holland is the best wing in this class, and they just take Ron Holland at number 1, and then all of a sudden those plans for Charlotte at 6 are a little bit different. So that's when someone, I think, like you mentioned with Stephon Castle, brings some size into that backcourt. If you could bring like LaMelo, who's like 6'8", and also Stephon Castle back there, a lot of these kind of smaller guard teams, like I think of my Cleveland Cavaliers trying to go in a playoff matchup with like 6'8" LaMelo and 6'6" Stephon Castle in the backcourt, I feel like that could provide a lot of trouble.
Yeah, I think Ron Holland is I think he kind of provides something similar with like the uber big team. Like I think you could almost run out a lineup of LaMelo Ball at 6'7", Brandon Miller 6'8", then Ron Holland at like a 3, 6'8", and then you could afford to put someone like a Grant Williams to kind of space the court at 6'6", and then like a Mark Williams at 7 foot. Like you can do something like that, or potentially play Podziemski at the 4 or Pokusevski at the 4, not Podziemski. But yeah, they have a lot of options at 6. I think 6 is a really good spot to be in because it'll make their choice a little bit simpler to where if they were high in the draft, they would have to weigh all the different wings in the draft, where I think a couple of those guys will be gone by then. You just take whoever's the best player left.